Good morning. My name's Dos Williams. I will call to order the April 6, 2023 special meeting of Santa Barbara County Board of Supervisors. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Supervisor Capps? Here. Supervisor Nelson? My apologies, I believe North County is muted. Can we get them unmuted?
I'm here.
Great, thank you. Supervisor Lavanino?
Here.
Supervisor Hartman?
Here.
And Chair Williams?
Here. I just want to make sure that everybody here knows that Supervisor Nelson and Supervisor Hartman are both here, but are in the North County office. You can see their wonderful faces on the television. So we may look like three, but we are truly five, one county united. So at this time, please stand and join the board in pledging allegiance to the flag. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Is there a CEO's report this morning?
No report this morning, Chair.
Madam Clerk, is there any announcements or changes to our agenda today?
Chair Williams and members of the board, I do have a few announcements this morning. And before I begin, can Jesus Jimenez, who is joining us via Zoom, please translate my first announcement for those members of the public who are in person today?
Ready.
First, I would like to announce that we do have translators standing by and available to provide consecutive Spanish translation during today's public comment.
Primeramente queremos anunciar que tenemos servicios de interpretación al español para el periodo de comentarios del público.
For those members of the public using this service today, they will be provided the necessary time to complete their comments and the allotted time plus the time to translate their comments.
Y para aquellos miembros del público que quieran utilizar la interpretación, tendrán suficiente tiempo para dar su comentario al público, a más aparte tiempo adicional para la traducción de su comentario.
Thank you, Jesus. And if you have any further instructions you would like to provide to the members of the public who will be using these services, you could do so now.
Thank you. Buenos días. Como ya mencionó la señora, tenemos servicio de interpretación disponible para aquellos miembros que estén en la audiencia. Por favor, déjenle saber que van a ocupar al intérprete. Yo estaré disponible para cuando estén en el podio. Y simplemente recuerden, por favor, decir un par de enunciados y permitir que la interpretación se diga también para poder estar en comunicación de todo su comentario. Pueden hacer un comentario, una pausa para interpretación y continuar su comentario hasta que termine de hacer su comentario. Gracias.
Thank you so much, Jesus. I appreciate it. And lastly, for the Board of Supervisors' methods of public participation and to provide public comment on general public comment or an item on the board's agenda, please see page 2 of the agenda. Individuals that would like to provide verbal public comment may do so via Zoom by registering in advance via the link available on page 2. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact the clerk of the board's office at area code 805-568-2240. Again, that's 805-568-2240. And that concludes my announcements today. And one final thing for those members who are participating via Zoom, if you could please log in now, we will be going to our first departmental item momentarily. Thank you.
So I just want to explain a little bit the items. There are two items. There is an open item on an urgency ordinance for just cause for residential evictions. There is also a closed session. A closed session is when the county anticipates either litigation that we will initiate against someone or that we will be the recipient of. And then before that, there is public comment, but public comment on items not on this agenda. So right now is the time when we will take public comment for items that have nothing to do with the just cause for residential evictions. Then we will take the just cause for residential evictions urgency ordinance up. So general public comment today?
Chair Williams and members of the public, it doesn't appear that we have any members of the public who wish to speak on general public comment today. I do have 2 members of the public with raised hands, so perhaps we can go to them on Zoom just to see if it was for our departmental item today or for general public comment, an item not on our agenda today. So we will go to Anna Marie Gott. Anna?
Good afternoon, supervisors. I would just like to make a comment about the costs of living in Santa Barbara and the fact that the county has a minimum wage that is far below what it would take to actually house someone in the county. You know, your minimum wage is $15 an hour. And with a minimum wage for county residents at $15 an hour, and with the cost of housing as expensive as it is in Santa Barbara, it really, just shows that the Board of Supervisors is fine with businesses paying poverty wages to employ their employees. And I think that the Board of Supervisors needs to take a hard look at themselves, considering all of the housing that is being built and the fact that this housing is, not within, people who are being paid close to the minimum wages ability to actually afford without crowded conditions or without people living in substandard housing. And that you really need to look at implementing a living wage throughout the entire county. If you were to do that and look at, ensuring that people who are working 40 hours a week, who, can actually afford a place to live in Santa Barbara. So I would just urge you to consider looking at the actual cost of living, what your wages are being paid throughout the county, and actually consider implementing a living wage. Thank you.
And that concludes our requests on general public comment today.
Then we will go to departmental item number 1, which is the urgency ordinance on just cause for residential evictions.
Chair Williams and members of the board, departmental item number 1 is sponsored by Supervisor Williams and Supervisor Capps. It is a hearing to consider recommendations regarding an urgency ordinance to amend County Code Chapter 44 to add Article 6, just cause for residential evictions, 4/5 vote required, and or alternatively consider recommendations with a 3/5 vote required. Thank you.
We will have a brief staff presentation. Mr. Spencer, Mr. Killebrew.
Good morning, Chair Williams and Supervisors. My name is Spencer Brandt. I'm the District Representative for Supervisor Williams. With me is Jordan Killebrew, District Representative for Supervisor Capps. We are here to give a brief overview of the item before you today. I'm going to start with an overview of existing law. Santa Barbara County Chapter 44 requires that landlords pay relocation benefits equal to 3 months of fair market rent or $7,000, whichever is greater, when there's a qualifying relocation event such as an eviction. In state law, the Tenant Protection Act of 2019 requires that a landlord have a just cause to bring about a residential eviction. One of these just causes that a landlord can cite for terminating a tenancy is that they plan to substantially remodel a unit. This state law also allows local jurisdictions to pass their own just cause eviction ordinances so long as that they are more protective than what exists in state law. And lastly, I'll also mention that the preservation of affordable housing stock is a policy of the Board of Supervisors in the housing element dating back to 1993. Now I'll pass it to Jordan to talk a little bit about the proposed just cause ordinance.
Thank you. Thank you, Spencer. Hello, everyone. Jordan Killebrew. So proposed just cause requirements. We're looking at an ordinance modeled off of a recent action by the city of Santa Barbara. We are requiring that landlords to demonstrate good faith We also looking at landlords must provide early notice to tenants of plans to perform a substantial remodel, obtain all necessary permits prior to giving tenants a notice of termination of tenancy, and serve tenants a copy of all permits, the scope of work to be performed, and why the work cannot be completed in a safe manner while the tenant still occupies the unit. And furthermore, we want to provide recommendation, actions, the board to consider the following. Adopt an urgency ordinance requiring just cause for residential evictions to be effective immediately, or alternately, consider the introduction, first reading of an ordinance requiring just cause for residential evictions and set a hearing date to consider adoption on April 18, 2023. Thank you.
We'll have some board questions, but one thing that struck me in reading the language, the requirements go down, and one of the requirements is giving notice. One of the requirements is obtaining permits from the relevant authority, which would be the county. Is this something, the meeting these requirements, is it something that is concurrent, or would the permits have to be obtained before the notice, or would the permits need to be obtained by the expiration of the notice? This is a question for County Council, of course. But I will give time. And I'm happy to
Mr.
have,
Chair.
if there's other questions, we could go over those first.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, the current language of the ordinance requires that the permits already be obtained at the time of the notice, because the section says that the tenants would be served with a copy of the permits along with the written notice stating the reason for termination.
And that also would be the case in this draft of our urgency update, correct?
Mr. Chair, both the draft urgency ordinance and the standard ordinance contain the same language.
Thank you. That's helpful. Other questions from the board? Supervisor Capps.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you first, Chair Williams, for being such a strong partner on this item, to the teams, also to County Council, and to the public comment. Those of you who showed up 2 days ago gave the most powerful public comment that I've experienced in my time in public service. Just to set the stage a little bit here, as we know, on March 16th, each of the 264 units at CBC and the sweeps received a notice of termination. And just to talk about what this is a lot more than just about one housing complex. This is about the rents here in Santa Barbara, which we know are the highest across the country for any small city. This is about probably 800 people, not just a few, but 800 people. This is about multi-generational families living at the sweeps, at CBC, raising their children. When we were there, we saw tricycles, we saw sand pails. This is about hardworking people, students who just, because of the system, rarely catch a fair break. This is about the fact that rents have more than doubled in the past 2 decades, far surpassing incomes. This is about an out-of-state and out-of-touch landlord who fails to understand the community, even just as example, failing to provide these notices in any language other than English. And again, this is about exploitation. So what I'm really thankful to the team, to everybody who advocated for this, is that we are today doing everything we can to be as bold and proactive as we can about these tenants, but about all tenants in Santa Barbara County. This is about who we are as a community. And I just want to, again, thank, before we get into all the questions about the technicalities. Thank you, Chair Williams.
Thank you. I think that's good, because typically what we do in our business is give a board letter that gives the intent behind an item. And so that's partially you're in my charge. And I will just say, you know, I had a deeply disturbing meeting yesterday with someone who was well-intended, wanted to make some things better, but his background was as a real estate investor. And he said it is precisely the fact that you guys, meaning not just the county, but our whole area, does not produce enough rental housing that gives a chance for people in my industry to essentially take advantage of the system and squeeze people out. If there was enough housing, people would have alternatives, and these people have no alternatives because there is not adequate rental housing out there. And it gives a chance for people who are not thinking of their ethical responsibility for the community to take advantage of that to the maximum extent possible, and to even, in some cases, not comply with our ordinance or other things that would further disadvantage renters, particularly renters if they did not have legal help or the county with them. And I want to say the county is with you. It is our intent today to move as fast as we can to provide additional protections. You may not find the ordinance perfect in every way. This happened about light speed for the county. And so we attempted to do what we are certain we have legal justification to do. And it is not all of the county's options, which is why there is a closed session and why there are other options available. Are there any other board questions before we move to public comment?
Chair Williams?
Mr. Nelson?
Yes, thank you. I had a couple questions. Is it possible for someone to do substantial improvements without needing a permit?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, Supervisor Nelson, whether or not work triggers a permit depends on the type of work that's done. So there is work that can be done without a permit. And so that's really, we would look to our building code and our zoning code, whether or not a permit would be required for the work.
So I think the next question is, what is the definition of substantial? Is it a dollar amount?
Chair Williams and Supervisor Nelson, there's not a dollar amount set out, but substantial remodel means the replacement or substantial modification of any structural, electrical, plumbing, or mechanical system that requires a permit, or the abatement of hazardous materials, including lead-based paint, mold, or asbestos, that cannot reasonably be accomplished in a safe manner with the tenant in place, and that requires the tenant to vacate. And state law sets out specifically that cosmetic improvements alone do not qualify as substantial rehabilitation. So this includes painting, decorating, and minor repairs that could be safely performed without requiring the property be vacated.
And the reason why I asked the
And
question-
Supervisor Nelson, I just wanted to add in the language, it reads that the justification for that the repairs would actually require an individual leaving for at least 30 days is one of the things, steps asked for in the ordinance. So most repairs that do not require a permit would not require somebody to leave for at least 30 days.
Well, Chair Williams, what I was getting to is that it seems that the owner of this property that in question has found a loophole. I'm just trying to define the potential loopholes for this discussion and give us all to have the opportunity to potentially close those or better define those. And so that's why I'm bringing up the subject matter on whether there is still an opportunity for someone to potentially not need a permit to do substantial renovation or not.
I like how you're thinking.
So I may not get there, but I'm trying to make better policy if you guys move this along.
Absolutely.
The other question I had is, will this, if an urgency ordinance is passed today, will it apply to the CVC or the sweeps?
Supervisor Nelson, I'm not sure who that question was for. Could you please repeat it?
Well, the reason why we potentially need an urgency ordinance is because there was something that's happened in Isla Vista with I think it's called the CBC property and the sweeps. And I was curious on whether the urgency ordinance would apply to that property now and to those tenants that are being evicted. Would this slow down the process of those evictions?
Supervisor Nelson, members of the board, the ordinance would apply, if the urgency ordinance was adopted, it would be effective immediately. So for any notices that would be sent out after this, it would apply. If permits have not been received yet for that work, then the property owner would need to obtain those permits prior to giving the notice. So it's difficult without knowing all the facts, but yes, it is possible that it would impact current events.
So it would only impact those at those properties that have not yet received their notice. But if they've already received the notice, it would not impact those parties.
And their permits, because our current ordinance requires permits as well.
Our current ordinance requires permits prior to. I thought that's what the question is. I'm sorry, I'm confused.
Supervisor Nelson, members of the board. So the county has an existing ordinance on Chapter 44. It's been in place since 2011, which does require 3 months of relocation payments or $7,000, whichever is greater. And that does apply when an owner gives notice for substantial rehabilitation, includes obtaining a permit. So that ordinance is already in place and would apply as long as it qualifies. There's various reasons that it can apply, and if it's triggered, then that would apply already. This new urgency ordinance is adding additional requirements for just cause, as well as adding additional protections depending on the circumstance. So for instance, if it's in the case of a substantial remodel, then we're adding additional protections and additional steps that an owner would need to take.
But this is prospectively, not retrospectively.
Supervisor Nelson, members of the board, yes, that's correct.
And my last question, as far as these permits that are concerned, these are just building permits. These would be ministerial permits or over-the-counter permits, or would these be discretionary permits that would be needed for substantial improvement?
Supervisor Nelson, members of the board, again, it depends on the type of work that an owner is proposing, but typically these would be building permits. But it's possible that an owner could seek different types of permits for the work.
Sure, but they'd be building permits that would not be subject to appeal.
Mr. Chair and Supervisor Nelson, members of the board, I believe what you said is that it would be permits that were not subject to appeal. Is that correct?
Yes.
We would need to double check. I believe that a building permit, although it's ministerial, is appealable. Doing this off memory, I can double check. I believe it's appealable to a board of building appeals, but I would have to check. It is different than, say, a zoning permit, which is then appealable to the planning commission and then the board. It is a more streamlined process when it comes to a building permit.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions from the board?
I do have one, Chair Williams. I do want to put out there that part of perhaps to Supervisor Nelson's questions, part of the lay of the land here is that in this current situation, different notifications are being given out on different days to different tenants. And so there's confusion, I believe, as to how this could potentially apply today, if we were to take action today, because again, there's changing scenarios literally as we were meeting on Tuesday, different notifications were being sent out. So I'm hopeful that what we do here today will have an impact.
One last question, Chair Williams,
Yes, Supervisor Nelson.
and I probably should know this off the top of my head, but an urgency ordinance, how long does that last? Is that 12 months, 18 months?
Members of the board and Supervisor Nelson. So there's multiple types of urgency ordinances. So there is a type of urgency ordinance, which is a zoning ordinance, which does have time limits, which I think is what you're referring to. Initially, there's a period of time, and then it gets renewed and extended, and there's an end date to that. This type of urgency ordinance is proposed, is in effect and stays in effect until the board would repeal, rescind, or amend that.
Will,
Thank you.
does that answer your question, Supervisor Nelson?
Yeah. Again, as I mentioned before, I'm not sure if I'm going to get to the point to be able to support urgency ordinance. But if we do go down that route, I just want to put it out there that I would need to see an end date so that we could actually have a hearing on potential impacts of this long term and look at some of those things, hear from other stakeholders. This is obviously rushed, and I understand why, and I'm very sympathetic to why. So, I'm just putting that out there. That I would not be okay with it being indefinite. I think we need to hear from economists and other parties that there's potential impacts of these types of ordinances that might have unintended consequences. And I'm not today prepared to adopt something that would be indefinite. And I think I would need some more time, and I hope that we'd go down that route if in fact I can be there. I do, for the public's benefit, I do have a limited time that I'll be here today. And I will try to hang in as long as I can, but I had some previous commitments prior to the special meeting being called. And so I will try to be here to the bitter end if necessary, but I may have to depart.
Thank you, Supervisor Nelson. And then I'll try to get to public comment quickly so we can make sure that people can stay. To reinforce the points made by Supervisor Capps, it is our intention today to do more than just make a symbolic statement in support of the tenets of the sweeps. We want to make sure that you know that we are in support of your plight, but also that we are attempting to give defenses, tools within the unfortunate confines of established law. That those defenses are not perfect, but would be a substantial benefit over and above our current ordinance. Let's go to public comment.
Supervisor and members of the board, I just wanted to clarify one thing in response to Supervisor Nelson's comments, and that is that your board has discretion, although the ordinance is currently set up to be indefinite, the board does have discretion to set a date at which it would end, and the board has done that before with urgency ordinances.
Thank you. Let's move to public comment. I won't put limits on it above the 3 minutes, but I'll just ask you to try to do 2 minutes or as close to 2 minutes as possible, because we do have supervisors that have some time constraints, and we will not be able to pass this if more than one leaves. So I just will ask you to make your own judgments with that in mind.
So this does require a 4/5 vote, correct? Emergency. Yep.
Supervisor Lavanino, yes, to pass the urgency ordinance, it requires a 4/5 vote. You're also agendized alternatively to consider a standard ordinance, and that's a majority vote.
Please proceed with public comment.
Chair Williams and members of the board, we have 48 requests to speak on this item.
So I will close the roll, so to speak, for further public comment.
And we will begin on Zoom with Connie Alexander to be followed by Krista Conroy. Connie?
Good morning, Supervisors. Connie Alexander with the Santa Barbara NAACP. And I want to thank you for this hearing this morning so that we could have a little more time to hear the background, which I think is essential. But I want to address why sometimes people would say, what premise are you, the board, acting on? Because sometimes it is those premises of what lays behind everything that we just need to make sure are forward. And so I want to encourage you that you are in effect addressing something that is systemic racism. Because if you think about what that is, it happens, systemic racism happens when institutions in government support oppression and discrimination through policies. And so I appreciate the fact that this is an opportunity for you to address that directly. This phrase in here, just cause, has become an active loophole, obviously, which does lend itself towards past things that have happened to people of color. Redlining has been a horrible part of the history of things that have happened in Santa Barbara County. So I'm encouraging you to send a very clear message here that in this county, we're not going to support and actively support the discrimination of a group of people. And in this case, it is overwhelmingly going to impact communities of color and families. When you think about the fact that they would have to come up with between $8,000 and $10,000 to relocate, that reinforces what is systemic racism. So thank you this morning, and I'll end my comments there. Thank you.
We will now go to Krista Conroy to be followed by Shondell Malcolm. Krista?
Thank you, Supervisors, and thank you for the opportunity to be heard today. My name is Krista Connery. I'm an attorney with Housing and Economic Rights Advocates. We're a California statewide nonprofit that assists and advocates for residential tenants. And I'm here to call on the supervisors to make any urgency ordinance requiring additional steps of an owner before recovering possession for a substantial remodel, that any ordinance such as this apply to each stage of the eviction process, including to the recovery of possession through an unlawful detainer. Right now, and without applying the ordinance, an urgency ordinance, in such a way to apply prospectively to any stage of the recovery of possession process, including the unlawful detainer, most of the 800 plus tenants at CBC and the sweeps will not be protected, because many of them, in fact, all of them have already received notices, and it's very likely that this ordinance will not assist them without applying to, again, all the stages of a landlord's attempt to recover possession of a property. And I will just share and echo some colleagues who will speak today and who have already spoken, that in working with some of these tenants and beginning to assist them, a huge group of them are families with children, persons with disabilities, persons of color, low-income individuals. Many are Section 8 voucher holders who will face unique systemic discrimination in finding any other housing options. But despite, the fact that it's already very difficult to find any affordable housing in the county, these tenants will face a uniquely challenging prospect of finding anything that could replace the homes that they already have. It will be a potentially insurmountable hurdle that could lead many of them to homelessness. So I echo the calls that the county should take action today to protect not just prospectively all future tenants in Santa Barbara County who might receive substantial remodel eviction notices, but to those who have already received them. Otherwise, there's a humanitarian crisis that could occur in the county. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
We will now, we will now go to Shondell Malcolm to be followed by Leanna DiSerato. Shondell?
Good morning, and thank you County Board of Supervisors. I am a tenant who recently received a eviction notice. My landlord gave me the eviction notice with the intent of doing a substantial remodel. In my case, the contractor said that the work can be done with me being in the house. However, the owner is not going to allow me to return to the house. So the impact this has had on me is that my rent was $1,800 and I now had to rent a place for $3,000. That's a 62% increase in my rental fees that I'm going to experience. So there's a couple of things that I want to talk about, and it's the rental in our county. Most places will not rent to you if the rent is over 30% of your income. And I live in Lompoc, so our income, the median income is $75,000. That means that most people in Lompoc can only afford to rent up to $800 or $1,875. So a $3,000 rent is way out of people's range for renting. And what it's done is it's essentially taken a single family household and turned it into a multi-family household because that's the only way people can survive. One of the other things, how this has impacted me is, and I think Supervisor Nelson touched on this, I think it was him, the amount of money it takes to move into a place. So me moving into this new place that I'm living in, I had to come up with $8,500 to move in. I do not have that money in my account, so I had to borrow against my retirement in order to accomplish that. And it's a $10,000 loan at 8.75% for a 5-year term. But my lease is only for a 1-year term. So if I have to move within that after that 1 year, I now have to come up with another move-in cost, and I'm already behind the curveball on this. And this is what a lot of the residents in Santa Barbara County are facing. So I appreciate the fact that you guys are looking at this and you're taking it serious. And I support an emergency ordinance that will protect the Santa Barbara County residents. Thank you.
We will now go to Leanna Deserato to be followed by Elliot Hammond. Leanna? Leanna, we have unmuted you on our end. If you can unmute to provide your comments. We will now go to Elliot Hammond to be followed by Kevin Goodwin. Elliot?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Elliot. Please proceed.
Okay, great. Good morning, supervisors. My name is Elliot Hammond. I'm here today as a member of the Santa Barbara Tenants Union and also as a tenant in District 2, where I was born and raised and have resided most of my life. I want to thank you for recognizing the urgency of the situation that Core Spaces residents and thousands of other tenants all over the county are facing with regard to these rent evictions, and for acting swiftly to protect them from losing their homes. As a tenant response team lead for the Santa Barbara Tenants Union, I co-facilitate a tenant help desk meeting every week on Zoom for our members. And almost every week for the past 2 years, we have new people on our call who are facing rent evictions. And the rate at which we're seeing these cases has skyrocketed over the past 6 to 12 months. As you know, landlords are taking advantage of the loophole in the California Tenant Protection Act and our Just Cause ordinance to push out their long-term tenants to double or triple the rents, all because they've learned that they will not be held accountable or face any repercussions for their actions. I urge you to pass this urgency ordinance today, but only having incorporated the amendments that were suggested by Legal Aid Foundation so that there's protection for the CBC and the sweeps residents. An urgency ordinance that does not protect these residents in IV would be a failure of what you set out to do by having this meeting today and is unacceptable to them. That's all I have for now. Thank you so much.
We will now go to Kevin Goodwin to be followed by Diana Collins Puente. Kevin? And Kevin, we have unmuted you on our end. If you can please unmute yourself to provide your comments.
Thank you, Board. I appreciate the time to speak to you. My concern is for the smaller property owners, not necessarily institutional property owners, and the effects it'll have on them in providing housing for our local community. I work with several people that own duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, and this ordinance will make it difficult for them to continue to own those properties. So I think both sides of this need to be looked at. And also the county needs to provide housing or other nonprofits rather than pushing this on to private property owners. I think a full analysis of this needs to be made prior to just enacting a rule to solve a specific problem. And it is a real problem that exists, but it can't be made with sweeping action. Thank you for the time.
My apologies, Diana is not here. We will now go to Myra Jimenez to be followed by Rochelle Sim. Myra?
Hello?
We can hear you.
Hello?
Please proceed.
Oh, hi. Yes. So right now at the time, we're having problems with the owner of Sandpiper property. He actually wants to rebuild some more apartments and wants to take out 28 spots for tenants, and there's no parking in the west side. So it's really hard for us to come home and not find parking. And we just have till the 23rd of this month where he's going to make those changes.
We will now go.
Hello?
We will now go to Rachel Sim to be followed by LaWanda Lyons Pruitt. Rachel?
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Rachel Sim. I'm a tenant in Santa Barbara, and I'm calling to support passing the urgency ordinance with the suggested changes by the Legal Aid Foundation that are being circulated in order to protect tenants in IV and also tenants throughout the county that are facing or will face this kind of displacement, which, as Elliot mentioned, is becoming increasingly common. And I also urge you to add further amendments to strengthen the ordinance to ensure that it actually effectively protects IV tenants and other tenants in our community. Firstly, landlords should not be allowed to remove tenants for cosmetic remodels. Tenants should only be required to leave their homes to remedy habitability concerns, which are already a landlord's responsibility. And I'd like to point out that that's one of the oft touted benefits of being a renter, is that it is not supposed to be my responsibility to maintain the upkeep of my unit. Tenants also need to be provided with temporary alternative housing during the renovation, and they deserve the right to return to the unit with the same lease terms once the work is actually complete. Anything else is just allowing landlords to neglect the units while continuing to collect our rent before evicting us and then raising the rent without any limits. Unscrupulous landlords will find any and all loopholes that they can to evict tenants and to raise the rent beyond what is sustainable, what is manageable, what is justifiable, and even what is, in my opinion, ethical. I urge you to follow the lead of other jurisdictions and pass stronger protections for our community. In fact, 5 jurisdictions already do not allow for substantial remodel justified evictions at all. They only allow a landlord to evict in order to comply with a government order to vacate, abate, or similar, and we need these protections in Santa Barbara County to keep us safe and to keep our community vibrant. Thank you.
We will now go to LaWanda Lyons Pruitt to be followed by Ana Rosa Rizzo Centino. LaWanda?
Good morning, Chair Williams and Supervisors. And I apologize for my phone ringing. LaWanda Lyons Pruitt, representing the Santa Maria Lompoc branch of the NAACP. We want to thank you for taking the steps that you're taking today to protect the tenants in our county. If you do not take the steps that you're taking, we know that it harms our communities. And so we really appreciate you and families, and we appreciate you taking that step. I was actually going to read the email that I received from Mr. Shundell Malcolm Shundell, but he appeared before you and spoke. But we think that the steps that you're taking, get faith, early notice, obtaining permits prior to serving the notice, those are all important. Thank you again, and have a good day.
I just want to use LaWanda's testimony to as proof that you can get your ideas across in abbreviated form. So just remember, we need 4 of us to be able to stay here to be able to vote on the ordinance today. Please proceed.
We will now go to Anna Rosarizo Centeno to be followed by John Tyne. Anna?
Hello, Board of Supervisors. I want to support the emergency ordinance and make sure that it actually applies to the residents that are currently being evicted. I represent the Central Coast Climate Justice Network, and just like we care about animals being able to stay in their environment, we should care about Black, Indigenous, people of color who are human beings staying in their environment, because we are part of the environment. And this continues to happen all the time. There's been mass evictions that have happened before where we've come to the County Board of Supervisors and you all have done nothing in the past. So please take this as your opportunity to step up and actually stand against racism and stand for people being able to stay with their families in their communities. Because as we know, currently people keep getting pushed out of these communities. When you talk about the Chicano Latino population specifically, I believe it's a very high number. I think over 70% that have already been pushed out of this area. So do your job, represent the residents, and make sure that this will actually help the people that are currently being faced with displacement. And I just want to thank the Santa Barbara Tenants Union so much for your work, because I know it's not easy, and I know that it's very heart-wrenching work when you see people being ripped from their communities, children that are used to playing in the places that they currently play, with their friends that they currently play, and to have to imagine a future without that. So thank you so much for your time, and I do want to make sure that you all are able to get to a vote, so I'll yield the rest of my time.
We will now go to John Tyne to be followed by Linda Honigman. John?
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity. I am an attorney here in town. I'm a real estate broker. I'm on the front lines. I represent landlords and tenants in unlawful detainer actions all the time, and I deal with the Tenant Protection Act constantly. I echo my partner's comments earlier that I'm concerned about the effect that this has on the smaller landlords, the owners of units 1 to 4. And there are many examples throughout the law in California that treat owners of 1 to 4 properties differently from owners of properties that have more than 4 units. And I would encourage you to consider, if not in this emergency action, then at least in the ongoing ordinance, an exemption for owners of 1 to 4 units, that it not apply to the 1 to 4 units, because we're creating a disincentive to improving properties. And quite honestly, the unintended consequences are removing properties from the rental stock and increasing rents. And so I applaud you for making sure that this particular exemption is exercised in good faith by requiring the production of permits. I think that's prescient and wise, but I do think that it would be also wise to exempt 1 to 4 units and to allow those smaller landlords to continue to update their properties and keep them safe for tenants in the future. Thank you.
We will now go to Linda Honigman to be followed by CM. Linda?
Thank you, Supervisors. I'm Linda Honigman, speaking as an individual resident of Nolita. On Tuesday, I spoke of the need to move the welcome mat from the investment companies with no ties to the community to local workers and families who contribute to our social fabric, resiliency, and economic vitality. What you do today can be the important first step of getting the word out across the country that we are no longer a place where easy money can be made at the expense of our residents. Unless a new strong ordinance is adopted, there are likely to be many more apartment buildings coming to the area like those bought by Core Places and the company that sold the buildings to them, Essex Property Trust. They both highlight high investor returns on their website. Essex, which also offers a 4% dividend to stockholders, still owns a property in our area. According to their website, you can rent a one-bedroom in Hope Ranch for $27.48, but it is actually located north of the 101. And I would not be surprised to see that being renovated soon so those rents can be doubled. For a more permanent solution, we also need a rental database to track this and many other problems related to rent increases, illegal short-term rentals, and fraud. We hope you will act boldly enough today to get Wall Street Journal coverage. Thank you.
We will now go to CM to be followed by Ryan Bell. C. Oh, you know what? I believe we just, C is no longer providing comment. We will now go to Ryan Bell to be followed by Anna Marie Gott.
Thank you, Supervisors. My name is Ryan Bell. I'm actually a tenant in Los Angeles County, but I am the Southern California Regional Coordinator for Tenants Together, which is a statewide coalition of tenant groups across the state of California. And I just wanted to provide my perspective across the whole state of California that we are seeing this kind of renovictions, as they're often called, especially where there are fewer tenant protections, such as in the Central Valley, the Central Coast, and more rural areas of Southern California. And I'm just calling today to urge support for this urgency ordinance, along with the amendments provided by the Legal Aid Foundation. We need to make sure that this ordinance applies to these tenants. This is certainly in the county's interest to not create a huge crisis that would include homelessness. I would also urge the board to consider in the future the right to return for the tenants that are displaced for reasons such as renovation. It's not their fault that they're being displaced, even though that renovation might be useful and important and essential. The tenant should have the right to return to their home once the renovation is done, as any homeowner would return to their home after renovation is done. I also want to briefly mention that I don't see any reason that small landlords should not have to pull permits before evicting tenants any differently than large landlords. There are some cases where different protections should apply to small landlords than to the large landlords. But in the case of pulling permits and demonstrating intent and good faith, why would small landlords of 1 to 4 units not need to act in good faith just because they're small? I think all landlords should act in good faith towards their tenants. So please pass this ordinance today and make sure that it applies to the current tenants facing eviction in the IV. Thank you.
We will now go to Anna Marie Gott to be followed by Sharon Byrne. Anna? Anna, we have unmuted you on our end. If you can please unmute yourself to provide your comments.
Sorry about that. Board members, I fully support this urgency ordinance, and I urge you to vote for an indefinite period of time or a minimum of 18 months, which will give you any time to conduct more due diligence. I agree that the urgency ordinance should cover all stages of an eviction as outlined by the Legal Aid Foundation, and hope you will consider including even stronger requirements. I would like the board to consider some additional actions. For example, can the board designate these and other properties with being within an affordable housing overlay if they have Section 8 or below market rentals? If so, wouldn't that provide additional protections moving forward? Can the board prevent large apartment buildings from renovating the entire building at a single time? If so, wouldn't it be great if we could only allow large apartment owners to only evict maybe 10 or 15% of the apartment occupants at a time, rather than in the entire building? Next, can the board consider voting to increase the amount paid if tenants are evicted? $7,000 simply is not enough money. You should be having a minimum of $7,000 per person, or increasing that to something like $25,000, considering what the rents are and how long people are living in some of these units. Finally, many homes in Santa Barbara County have been turned into illegal short-term vacation rentals, as well as permitted short-term vacation rentals. And I think that the board does need to do more to not only shut down the illegal short-term vacation rentals permanently, but also to amend the current ordinance to prohibit them. Thank you very much.
We will now go to Sharon Byrne to be followed by Alex and Trecken. Sharon? Sharon, we have unmuted you on our end. If you can please unmute yourself to provide your comments. Sharon Byrne, if you can please unmute yourself to provide your comments. We will now go to Alex and Trecken to be followed by Stephen Kraft here in Santa Barbara. Alex? Alex, unfortunately, it looks like you are not connected to a microphone. I'm unable to allow you to talk. If you can, please call in, or if you have any questions about how to connect, you can call my office at area code 805-568-2240. Again, that's 805-568-2240. We are now going to Santa Barbara with Stephen Kraft, who I believe might have stepped out of the room and is no longer with us. So we will now go to Jean Ziebach to be followed by Amanda Zavala. Jean?
Hi, I'm a homeowner in Santa Barbara, and I do agree with the emergency ordinance, which would include IV residents. And I feel that the tenants should be provided housing while this is going on, and they should be able to come back with the original what's it called? Yeah, the rent contract. Yes, the rent contract. Thank you.
We will now go to Amanda Zavala to be followed by Brian Johnson. Amanda?
Hello, good morning. Thank you for having me. My name is Amanda Zavala. I'm a long-term renter in Santa Barbara. During the course of the pandemic, Santa Barbara saw a massive influx of high-earning remote workers, as well as tremendous inflation to the housing market. Rents have doubled since 2020, but wages have increased marginally or stayed the same. Local long-term Santa Barbara community members are being pushed out with rapid precision as landlords capitalize on the new markets and take advantage of rent evictions. Minor renovations are being used as a guise for gargantuous rental increases. Teachers, service workers, hospitality workers, landscaping workers, and other public servants are being pushed out and commuting farther and farther to continue to keep Santa Barbara afloat. Families' lives are disrupted, and Santa Barbara is drained of its cultural and long-standing communities. As an education worker, I see the violent impacts of childhood housing insecurity every single day. We need to protect our local residents and preserve the diverse community that constitutes Santa Barbara by banning rent evictions indefinitely. Thank you.
We will now go to Brian Johnson to be followed by Nanny Harris.
Good morning, and thank you for taking this up. Appreciate the Board of Supervisors for considering this. Speaking on behalf of the Santa Barbara Association of Realtors, I'm not going to defend what's gone on in Isla Vista. There's no defense for it. However, as written, this ordinance would apply a large relocation assistance payment to any housing provider of 2 or more units, to ask mom and pop owner to pay 3 times the rent or $7,000, whichever is greater, could put a huge burden on them. And while we understand the need to help those in apartments in Isla Vista, and we certainly support that, the passing of this ordinance would apply to all apartments and all no-fault just cause evictions, not just to evictions due to renovations. So that seems to be that's a real concern for us. And so if the ordinance is passed, we would ask that there is a specific time frame involved, a specific location involved, apply to complexes of 5 or more units, or it should go through the normal process for more stakeholder input. And with that, thank you very much.
We will now go to Nanny Harris to be followed by Barbara Parment.
And Mandy, just want to reiterate our rules here. We don't, except when it's a ceremonial item like the presentation of a proclamation, we don't allow clapping or booing because, we are a republic. We need to hang together, and maybe I'm just going to use this as a moment to point out that sometimes sides that will be on sort of different sides today may be on the same side to produce more affordable housing in the future. So please proceed with public comment.
Hello again. My name is Nani Harris. I am a tenant in the Sweeps. I spoke before you previously on Tuesday regarding my situation, and I would first like to thank you for holding this special meeting and treating our situation with such urgency. I would like to emphasize that as a Section 8 participant myself, I know firsthand that should these renovictions happen, voucher holders, many of whom are elderly, disabled, and people of color, will be thrust into a housing market that is discriminatory. It is not right to displace low-income tenants, especially those of us who belong to protected classes, for the sake of renovations that have nothing to do with habitability concerns. If you care about the people in your districts, this ordinance must be passed. Please act to protect the most vulnerable members of our community. Thank you.
We will now go to Barbara Parment to be followed by Sam Cespedes.
Thank you, Board. My name is Barbara Parmet, and I'm representing Surge Santa Barbara. We show up for racial justice, and we stand with the tenants of Santa Barbara County and implore the County Board of Supervisors to pass an emergency ordinance immediately to stop this violence of mass evictions by core space. The unconscionable corporate cruelty of real estate firms must be stopped. For a multi-billion-dollar real estate firm like CoreSpace to simply calculate the cost-benefit analysis of throwing out onto the street as many as 800 people, including students, families with children, people with disabilities, and Section 8 tenants, is a kind of violence that should be declared immoral and illegal. You have the power and the responsibility to declare immediately a moratorium on mass evictions. Ban these rent evictions for all landlords. Vote for an emergency ordinance today. Thank you.
We will now go to Sam Cespedes to be followed by Nadia Abushanab. Sam?
Hi, my name is Sam Sapezi, and as I previously mentioned, I'm a first-generation, non-traditional UCSB student and a tenant at CBC in the Sweeps. This is my 3rd time speaking to you in hopes that we can show you how dire our situation is. In order to move into most apartment complexes, you must show that your income is 3 times the rent, which means if you are lucky enough to find a place, $2,500, probably north or south of Santa Barbara, many places will request bank statements and months' worth of pay stubs, showing that you make at least $90,000 a year for a 1-bedroom apartment. Even though my partner works 50 to 60 hours a week, if I don't postpone my graduation, we'd be homeless. I want you to understand that I'm one of the lucky ones here. Most people living here don't have the option of moving to another city or taking out loans to pay absurd rent amounts. Keep in mind, there was never a claim from CBC in the sweeps that renovation was necessary until they sold the complex to Core Spaces. I've talked to people in every building here. I've gone door to door, learning their stories and witnessing their pain. If you don't pass a law ending these renovations, you force people to either leave the county or become homeless, which will have a snowball effect on many small businesses in Santa Barbara, as people can no longer afford to live off minimum wage. You can put a stop to this. Stop allowing evictions to take place without proof of permits. Stop allowing landlords the ability to simply get rid of tenants so that they can make more money by increasing rent for future tenants. And if there is an actual reason tenants need to temporarily vacate, landlords should be required to house these tenants and pay their rental expenses until the work is completed, and they should be able to return to their apartments at the original rent. We elected you to stand up for us and represent us, and we can't afford to wait any longer. Thank you.
We will now go to Nadia Abushanab to be followed by Fernando Cortez. Nadia?
Good morning, Chair Williams and Supervisors. My name is Nadia Abushanab with SB CAN. Thank you for hearing us and acting so quickly. I urge you to pass the urgency ordinance before you today, provided that it contains the recommendations listed in the legal aid public comment letter. To be clear, without those recommended changes, the ordinance would not be sufficient to protect tenants at risk today. I also urge you to direct staff to consider additional amendments at another time that would further strengthen the ordinance, including not allowing rent evictions for cosmetic remodels, providing temporary housing for tenants during the renovations, and giving tenants a right to return once the work is complete with the same lease conditions. These rules are common sense. They exist in other jurisdictions, and we should have them here as well. I'm a tenant in the 1st District. I live on the Lower West Side in the city of Santa Barbara, and last year I experienced a rent eviction. I had been living in a limited equity affordable housing cooperative, the only one I know of in the city of Santa Barbara, and the co-op ended up selling our home to a private landlord. When it was time to renew the lease, the landlord decided instead to kick us out to do renovations. I was lucky enough to have friends with a room opening that I was able to move into, and that's where I live now, but most of my housemates were not. We all had college degrees. One of my housemates was working as a wildland county firefighter. One was an environmental consultant. One was working as an engineer for FLIR and Goleta, and none of them were able to find a place to live in Santa Barbara. I went back to that house recently, and now it's rented out to SBCC international students with multiple tenants living in each room. The walls were painted, there was a new sink in the kitchen, and there was new landscaping done. We could have easily stayed in the house when he did those changes. This is about enforcing a common sense law and holding landlords accountable to what they are claiming that they will do and what they're supposed to do already, not letting them claim to renovate simply to raise the rent more than the allowed 10% a year, which is already so much. I was lucky to find a place I can afford in the community where I work, but my housemates and I and our new home are concerned every day that this could happen to us again. It keeps us from reporting issues to the landlord in fear that they would decide to terminate our lease and raise the rent, because we are paying below market value, even though many of my housemates still struggle to make rent payments each month. This instability causes constant fear and stress. I love this community. I love the work that I do. I love living in this county, and I do not want to leave. But if my landlord were to do rent evictions, I would likely have to move out of this community. Again, please pass this urgency ordinance today and work on an even stronger ordinance to prevent this from happening to others in the future. Thank you.
We will now go to Fernando Cortez to be followed by Arsley Vasquez. Fernando?
I did want to note, because it's been mentioned several times, the amendments, and thank you to Ms. Abushanab for putting the value of the changes today versus the previous ordinance. But we will put the amendments that are being suggested. Some of the amendments that were suggested in the letter are already incorporated in this draft. Some are not, and we will put them all on the screen by the end of public comment so that they can be in the record and debated today. Mr. Cortez.
Good morning, Supervisors. My name is Fernando, and I am a current tenant at CBC in the Sweeps and a full-time worker, and we are just the latest target of these rent evictions. Thank you again for holding this special meeting and showing us that you are taking this crisis seriously. And I appreciate the time that you allowed us all to speak to you on Tuesday on how taking action would prove to us that the law could be on our side. And actually, last night, I did send you all an email. I didn't think that I'd be able to get the time off work to be here, and I hope that you still take the time to read my thoughts on how failing to take action would promote the predatory nature of wealthy landlords and corporations, and it would also prove that their indifference to our community's livelihoods is acceptable in Santa Barbara and the greater county. With that, I again urge you all to pass legislation to stop this renoviction and prevent these crimes from causing irreparable damage to our most vulnerable community members. Tenants should be provided temporary housing while they're being renovicted, and these tenants should also have the right to return to their homes with the same lease terms and rents once the work is complete. And after all, Core Spaces themselves should support this idea because they printed on our notices that they can't wait or that they, quote, can't wait to share with you what we have planned for the property and hope that you will all consider returning once the renovations are complete. So, Core Spaces, let's see if you mean that. Thank you.
We will now go to Arsley Vasquez to be followed by Chelsea Lancaster. Arsley?
Hello, good morning. My name is Zorali Vasquez Jimenez. I am here on representation of myself, my family, and my baby. I am a full-time student. I am a single mom, and I work up to 2 jobs. I can't afford 3 times the rent. I live with my family to be able to make ends meet. I can't even see my child some days. The only time I see her is when she comes to eat at the restaurant. How am I supposed to overcome this? Graduate? If I can't make ends meet, I can't afford to live out of this community. It became family. My child plays with our neighbors, and not just me, but our neighbors work up to 2 jobs to make ends meet, and they live with other family members, and they can't afford to make 3 times the rent. How are we supposed to live in the land of the free when it's costing us so much? I work 2 jobs. I go to school. How am I supposed to empower myself? How am I supposed to overcome this when I can't even see my child a lot? I need help. All these family members need help. I'm scared I'm going to be homeless with my child. Not just me, so many families are. I don't want to get separated from my mom, from my child. I don't want to leave school. We need your help. Imagine this was your family. Imagine you were in our situation. These people don't care about us. All they care about is making money. Off what? Other international students, other people who can afford this? I can't afford this. I can't afford to lose my home. I can't afford to lose school. How am I supposed to make more money if they're taking my education? They're taking time from my child. Not just me, but everybody else. This is a crisis that has been going on for years, and we don't get the help that we need. Yet there's multiple homeless people that are getting tickets for being homeless. How can you guys help us if we're screaming for help every day? How are we supposed to come out of poverty when we're stuck in the same level every time? I'm a first-generation college student. I'm a single mom. I'm working 2 jobs, and now I'm facing this. I'm not going to be quiet no more. I need help. And so do these families. We don't want to be separated. I can't have my 3-year-old living in the street. I can't. So please, please take this into consideration that it's not just me. It's thousands of people, people with disability, color, race, everything. It's not just about money anymore. Thank you.
We will now go to Chelsea Lancaster to be followed by Madeline Miller. Chelsea?
I said a lot the other day, and I want to cede my time for others, but Areli is one of my students, and I just want to amplify the fact that this has been going on for so long. This is destroying our community. This is destroying our county. And the people of Core Spaces and all these corporate landlords, they don't care about us. They don't care about you. This is about profit over people. As you named the other day, this is the largest mass eviction in the state of California. Take action. I don't have my glasses, so I can't read the talking points, but I want to amplify what's been said, especially by the tenants union, in terms of including the modifications from legal aid. Again, the most bold action possible. And I also want to amplify the points made by Ms. Connie Alexander and others. When we think about the law has not always been just. The law has uplifted and supported the ruling class. We are asking you for real, bold protections, for support, to actually represent the people who live in your community, who are in this room, who are on Zoom, who are working, who cannot be here. Because they are working in your restaurants, taking care of your children in your childcare facilities, teaching the children in our schools, working in our hospitals. We saw it during the mudslide. This community does not function because people cannot live where they work. So I just want to again implore you to take this boldest action possible. If there needs to be a short-term solution and then we continue to build on long-term solutions, we're here for the long haul. Thank you so much.
We will now go to Madeline Miller to be followed by John Douglas. Madeline?
Hello, thank you for having us today. My name is Madeline Miller, and I'm here today because I think that we have a moral responsibility to protect each other. The homelessness crisis in this county does not exist because of a lack of available housing. It exists because there is not enough protections against excessively high rent and the renovations happening in order to facilitate that. The issue of renoviction is an issue of safety. Today, we are asking you to do your civic duty like any firefighter or EMT. You must protect the people of this county from homelessness and displacement. Renters are not asking for your pity. They are asking to continue to pay rent, to continue to struggle in their own home, in their own community, to continue to fight for their right to try to make their lives more livable in this county. You have to protect the people of this county from the renovictions. Thank you.
We will now go to John Douglas to be followed by Max Golding. John?
Thank you. Thank you, supervisors, for taking this so seriously by giving us an opportunity to be heard. I just want to say, please do pass a strong ordinance with real teeth for enforcement. And if you could, I just want to agree with the folks that have said that tenants should have a right to return if they are kicked out due to a renovation of some sort. And it should apply to all landlords. Thank you very much for letting me speak.
We will now go to Max Golding to be followed by Frank Rodriguez. Max?
Can I cede my time to Alex Entrican, who just got here? Do you want to spit?
Max, we don't have
can't do that?
provisions for seating time.
Whatever you pass it. Yeah. So he's right. So do you get that? All right. Well, whatever you pass today has to protect the core spaces tenants. If it doesn't, it's a way. This is not a code red. That's a toothless virtue signal on your part. So actually make sure it protects the core spaces tenants, and that's it.
I want to thank Max for being the first one of many to contact me and to make sure that we were equipped to respond.
And we will now go to Frank Rodriguez to be followed by Max Aguilar. And for whoever just came into the room and previously signed up on Zoom, can you please go to the back table and speak with Leah to let them know? Thank you. Frank?
Thank you, Supervisor Williams and County Board. My name is Frank Rodriguez with the Central Coast Alliance United for a Sustainable Economy cause and also a resident of District 2 here in the county. We appreciate the push for an emergency ordinance. I think all the stories have really been uplifted on Tuesday and today. And a reminder that these kind of mass evictions have been happening. We've seen it so much in the West Side. I faced it when my family moved from Ivy, Goleta, Santa Barbara, Carpinteria. And to know that we really need to look at these loopholes and how landlords are taking advantage of it to evict our community. So we want the emergency ordinance to really focus on protecting the tenants in Isla Vista and other tenants facing eviction today so they are protected, but that this conversation continues and we look at all the available tenant protections, which includes evictions that are happening because of rent increases, and making sure we look at all the ways that we can protect the tenants, not only in South County, but throughout the region that are facing these evictions. So really appreciate on taking this action, but hopefully we continue this and be preventative of future evictions happening in our region. Thank you.
We will now go to Max Aguilar to be followed by Jonathan Aboud. Max?
Good morning, supervisors. My name is Marcos Aguilar. I tried to spell that correctly. Anyways, I'm thankful that you all called this meeting urgently and are taking action on this, and I want to save time, so I just fully support this ordinance and the additions made by the Legal Aid Foundation. Thank you.
We will now go to Jonathan Aboud to be followed by Ethan Bertrand. Jonathan?
Yes, hi, thank you, board, for having this special meeting and urgency ordinance. I spoke last on Tuesday, feels like a lot longer ago, shared my piece, so thank you for considering this, and I hope you pass this with the legal aid amendments. Thank you.
We will now go to Ethan Bertrand to be followed by Alex Sandoval. Ethan?
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Williams and honorable supervisors. It's good to be back with you here today. I'm proud to represent Isla Vista as the Goleta School Board member for Area 5. I speak on my own behalf today. I urge your board to pass the proposed urgency ordinance, adding Article 4 to Chapter 44. This will provide critical protections and assistance to our neighbors who are threatened by rent evictions. I urge you to do everything possible to make sure that this amendment provides relief to the up to 1,000 residents whose lives are being adversely impacted by the actions of core spaces. It is absolutely soul-crushing to recognize that 1,000 of my neighbors are likely to be displaced at a time when we have the most unforgiving rental housing market. As a school board member, my heart breaks for the children who live at CBC and the Sweeps, along with their parents. The thought of kids being displaced not only from their homes, but also from their school communities is absolutely devastating. Many residents will struggle to find new housing, not only in Isla Vista, but anywhere on the South Coast. Relocation assistance could make this task a little less daunting. I've had the privilege of living in Isla Vista for 9 years now, and I really mean it when I say privilege, because it is so hard to maintain housing in this community, especially for young people and working families. In addition to passing these protections, our local governments and UCSB must move forward with meeting our housing goals. Thank you to Supervisor Capps and Chair Williams for spearheading this ordinance, and I urge the board's support. Thank you.
We will now go to Alex Sandoval to be followed by Jennifer Smith. Alec?
Good morning, supervisors. Thank you for calling this special meeting. We've heard a lot of eloquent speakers today, and I will keep it brief. I just urge you to take actions that will support the people who have already been given eviction notices at the sweeps. Please don't be cowardly and allow small little problems to stop you from protecting children and people who have been given eviction notices. Don't get hung up on 1 to 4 units versus a bigger apartment building. Please don't get hung up on these little things and allow for children to get evicted in the meantime. Please protect them. Please protect these tenants. Thank you for your time.
We will now go to Jennifer Smith to be followed by Ben Allen. Jennifer?
Hi, good morning. My name is Jennifer Smith, and I'm the Executive Director at the Legal Aid Foundation of Santa Barbara County. And I just wanted to focus on the fact that we do believe that amendments are needed to clarify that the urgency ordinance is perspective to all stages of recovery of possession of the unit. So the way the eviction process works is that typically a notice goes out first, and then later down the line, a landlord may file a lawsuit in court, get a court judgment, and then that judgment may be enforced by the sheriff. So because tenants have already received notices, we just wanted to be sure that the urgency ordinance would apply to the subsequent unlawful detainers if they are filed. So just wanted to be sure that that language is included. And I believe my colleague shared some additional suggestions as well. I would also suggest that the county, a lot of jurisdictions will do parallel tracks. So you could pass an urgency ordinance and then continue on with a regular ordinance for additional enhancements and feedback from the community if that is the board's choice. So really, I also wanted to address, there were some comments about how this will impact landlords. This ordinance, as it's drafted, is really meant to enhance what's already existing. The Tenant Protection Act passed in 2019, so those of us who work in housing and eviction matters, this has been the policy for several years, as well as the county's current relocation assistance ordinance has been on for many years as well. And the proposal is meant to ensure that landlords are acting in good faith. So for those who are already acting in good faith, the status quo will just continue. It doesn't impact those who are already acting in good faith. So thank you for your attention to this important matter. On a personal note, I'm a former resident of Isla Vista myself. It's a community I really care about. And I want to thank you for your urgent action, as well as to County Council's office for all of their work in this effort as well. Thank you.
We will now go to Ben Allen to be followed by Anaya Kepper. Ben?
Hello. I think it gives us all heart to hear that we have support on the Board of Supervisors. But I have to say that this is just a speed bump for the larger corporations. I mean, they have all the resources that they need to prosecute these things, go through the motions and get it done, regardless of the legislation that, provides mild protections to, it just gives notice and stuff. Like that's not fundamental solution to the issue. So although this is a good start, there's so much more that needs to be done. And I think, many people have spoken much more passionately than maybe I ever could about this. So it behooves all of us to consider a deeper and more systemic solution to this problem. Thank you.
We will now go to Anaya Kepper to be followed by Kenny Chisholm. Anaya?
Hi there. My name is Ananya Kepper. I stood here on Tuesday as well. I'm one of the CBC Sweeps residents that will lose her home if this eviction goes through. First, I want to say thank you so much for holding this meeting. It makes me feel really proud to be part of the Santa Barbara community and makes me feel very protected and heard by a government body, which that's the first time in my life I've experienced this, so thank you. I wanted to say that there are many things that I can say about my personal feelings about this company coming in and buying my home and developing it and charging a lot more, but more like something that I don't think has been spoken to yet is that if the community workers that keep Santa Barbara and Goleta and Ivy running are forced out of their homes, that decreases the value of Santa Barbara homes. We're looking at increases in homelessness, we're looking at increases in traffic. If our day-to-day workers have to commute in for an hour every day, you're looking at massive increases in traffic. I was born in Santa Monica and I watched that happen to my community. You can't leave. You get stuck. It takes you 2 hours to get out of Santa Monica now because everyone that was an essential worker that works in Santa Monica can no longer afford to live there. And that's what we're doing to Santa Barbara. Right? I'm watching people get evicted from their homes and set up tents on the streets. And I don't want that to happen to Santa Barbara. We have a beautiful community. We don't need to court homelessness like that. It's also extremely important that we prioritize residents over these corporations because residents are more vulnerable. If you lose your residents, they can't afford to come back. There's no safety net for them. A multi-billion-dollar corporation can afford to wait a couple years to build their development. If it's really that important to them, they have the money to wait. We don't have that money. If we lose our homes, we're gone. We're on the street. We have to leave. We cannot come back. There's also this perception that Isla Vista is a college town, and Core Spaces is operating under that assumption. They develop student housing. That means that whatever they develop is going to mean losing our long-term residents and our families and our people that have been here for decades, for generations, are going to get kicked out of their homes in favor of students who come in, do their 4 years, and leave. And that's not what we want. That's not what I want. I picked CBC in the sweeps when I was looking for housing because I finished my master's next year, and I want to continue to work in the Goleta, Isla Vista area. That was very important to me in my selection of my home. And it is my home. I would also like to say that my unit doesn't need renovation. My house is beautiful. I moved into new floors, new carpets, new paint. Everything was up to date. Everything is beautiful. It doesn't need to change. I can't think what they would do to renovate my unit. So it seems false that they need to do these massive renovations. They certainly don't need to do it in my home.
Thank you. That is your time. We will now go to Kenny Chisholm to be followed by Amanda Cobb. Kenny?
Hello, County Supervisors. Thank you for your time. My name is Kenny, and I'm a tenant in the city of Santa Barbara. I don't necessarily have an issue with everyone who does property management for a living. For those privileged enough to own property, it's not impossible to offer reasonable rent, to make timely repairs, and to otherwise make a good faith effort to ensure that their tenants have secure, safe, and affordable housing. I do have a problem with there not being policies in place to protect vulnerable people from those property managers and property management companies that would forcibly remove someone or some family from their home under a shoddy guise of mandatory improvements and then raise the rent out of reach for that same family to return to their home. To be pushed out into a housing market where the next cheapest option is nearly double the rent you were paying previously is simply insane. Such an option should not be possible for landlords to remove tenants for improvements and then not give them the opportunity to move back in with the same lease terms. Harmful policies like this don't have to be made by evil people or malintended in order to be racist. It matters what the real consequences are. And the real consequences are that rent evictions are disproportionately displacing people, families, and whole communities of color at an unacceptable rate in Santa Barbara. And we cannot stand to oppose racism with our mouths and our mission statements, but to let our own local communities of color be wiped away in the name of profit. To respond to a previous comment, even for landlords with less than 5 units, it should not be too much to ask for them to obtain required building permits and to serve notices within a reasonable amount of time. If something that basic can actually be considered a disincentive for people to manage properties, I don't know what level of work these smaller landlords are willing to do in order to take care of their tenants. This is a realm in which poor business practices doesn't just mean less sales or lower profits. It means people ending up on the streets, losing their homes, losing stability, and that is absolutely unacceptable. We cannot let landlords try to reframe necessary accountability as victimization. I repeat, we cannot let landlords try to reframe necessary accountability as victimization. They are not the victims in this context. Tenants are. And to respond to another comment, there is nothing but sweeping action today that can protect us tenants. So please, County Supervisors, I implore you to protect us by moving forward with this urgent ordinance and its amendments immediately. Thank you.
We will now go to Amanda Cobb to be followed by Cressida Silvers. Amanda?
Hi, my name is Amanda, and I am here representing Habitat for Humanity here in southern Santa Barbara County. I'm also personally a renter, so I'm coming at it from both of those angles. First, thank you so much for hosting this meeting on such short notice. I'm here today to urge you to pass the proposed urgency ordinance with the Legal Aid Foundation amendments. At Habitat, I work with low-income homeowners, a majority of whom are seniors on a very small fixed income, but they represent just a small fraction of those who are at risk of displacement in our community. Low-income renters are in the most precarious situation. 56% of renters in the county are cost-burdened and cannot afford to lose their housing and face a rental market with rapidly rising rents. To finish, I just want to express my support for the tenants union. When my landlord threatened to evict me last year, they showed up for me and supported me in ways that no other resource I could find did. They provided really tangible support, and the leaders in the tenants union do this on a daily basis for countless community members and on their own time just because they care deeply about other people. I urge you to continue to listen to the solutions that they have identified because they know firsthand what will make the biggest difference in the broader community. Thank you.
And I also just want to thank Habitat for being there for Sandpiper Mobile Home Park when it was hit by the tornado the week before last. Within 2 days, they were out there helping clean up. So thank you on behalf of Carpinteria residents.
We will now go to Cressida Silvers to be followed by Marcy Ortiz. Cressida?
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Cressida Silvers. My family and I live in unincorporated Santa Barbara County in District 2. And I thank you very much for your work here today. We've been living in Santa Barbara in the area for more than 15 years. And while we're fortunate enough to have been able to purchase our own home, we don't struggle with the unfathomable anxiety and damage of housing insecurity in this insane rental market. It does affect us. It affects all of us. So while I join the urgent call for you to act now to protect our neighbors in Isla Vista, this is but one example, one particularly egregious example of landlord abuses that have been going on for years, for generations, that fall disproportionately on our Black and brown community members, that go on throughout the county and continue to go on unless the actions you take now not only protect the residents of the sweeps, but also serve to protect our neighbors throughout the county who are suffering under the same circumstances, but may not have the numbers to garner the same level of attention. This separates families and unravels the fabric of our community. When the people and families who make up the fabric of our community, the people who make our community function from day to day, when they move outside of our community, it hurts all of us. Whether it's a natural or traffic disaster that shuts down the freeway and shuts down access for our commuting teachers, nurses, first responders, it affects all of us. When more and more people have to commute, it adds long-distance congestion to our roadways, increases air pollution, and increases the amount of money that goes to the cost of commuting for our community members, taking away money for food and medicine, taking away dollars that might otherwise be spent within our communities supporting our local businesses. Employers can't attract or retain employees, and that affects our entire community. I'm involved in my children's elementary school, and so right now that's my main frame of reference. So I'm thinking about the friends my kids have had to say goodbye to over the years, the teachers my kids have had to say goodbye to. I'm thinking about the after-school events that teachers can't participate in because they're looking at hour-long commutes to get home to their own families. I recognize these seem like trivial compared to what renters are facing, but the point is we're all affected in some way, whether we recognize it or not. So yes, address the urgency of the sweeps and address the faulty and discriminatory system that hurts us all. Thank you.
We will now go to Marcy Ortiz to be followed by Alejandra Tomel. Marcy?
Hello. I just wanted to say thank you for having this emergency meeting. I was so shocked when I left the meeting on Tuesday and less than 24 hours knew I'd be back here. Took off time for work. It's that important to me. I'm really urge that you are able to do something today, either passing this ordinance, helping these people before it's too late, and then in the future, if we could somehow continue having discussions on what we can do to move forward. I don't live here. I'm talking for people that live in the Santa Barbara County. I live in Solvang. It's not a small unit, but I live in an apartment unit that has 58 units. And we were bought out by a big group just over a year ago. And they haven't said they're going to do this, and there hasn't been any hint at it. But all of the tenants where I live are in fear of this same thing happening. And when you talk about where I live is the same as all the stories of these people. It's minorities, it's elderly, it's people with disabilities, it's people that don't have the funds to move on. And so I just want to thank you again for having this. Everybody else has said everything that I can agree with. And I hope that we can continue with a California forward here. California has always been known as being the person that steps out first and gets things going for the rest of the nation. And I just hope that in this case that we can start with this, not leave any more people behind, and that we can start picking up and working with property owners, working within the law to protect the tenants, and especially the lower income and the people that need our help the most in our county. Thank you.
We will now go to Alejandra Tomel to be followed by Alex Entrekin. Alejandra? That's correct.
Hi, good morning to all. It's my third time speaking. I ask you all put yourselves in our situation. My name is Alejandra. I am a tenant at the CBC in the Sweeps Apartments. Imagine having to explain yourself to your family and processing yourself. You could potentially be homeless within the next few days, months, weeks. There are innocent children, hardworking individuals who are affected by this inhumane situation. I am opposing to being kicked out, being homeless anywhere without to go with my dog, who is my emotional support to me, my 3-year-old, my 9-year-old who suffers from fainting episodes, seizures when under stressful situations. I ask, pray you hear and are pleading and help us. As you can see, I am recovering from a second back surgery, metal plates and screws in my back. Therefore, I have been diagnosed permanently, partially disabled. After receiving the eviction notice, I feel gut-wrenching every day. My antidepressants haven't been helping because the amount of stress I am under. Trying to live a normal life while trying to stay on top of my bills, rent, providing safety for my children. I personally could not be able to pay $2,800 a month for rent. It is unrealistic to me. So therefore, this would make it nearly impossible for me to be able to provide a safe place for my children. Please protect my family, our neighbors, our community from the biggest mass eviction in California. I want to thank you all for giving me the time to speak and listening to my testimony, and why it is important for my family and I to have this strong eviction protection ordinance passed immediately. Thank you.
We will now go to Alex Entrekin to be followed by Christina Lang and David Moore back on Zoom. Alex?
Thank you to the Board of Supervisors and to the tenants who showed up on such incredible short notice. My name is Alex Entrekin, and I'm the managing attorney for housing at the Santa Barbara Legal Aid Foundation and a member of the Santa Barbara Tenants Union. I strongly urge the supervisors to consider the changes that we as the Legal Aid Foundation have suggested, and that they consider the intent of this ordinance, that it's intended to fairly apply rules requiring good faith and basic process to all tenants throughout the county. As tenants union members have explained, there was a Thursday night call every night or every Thursday for the last 3 years. We had nights with 16 tenants coming with eviction notices. We had to put an intake process in place to manage the flow. I say this because what's going on in IV is going on throughout the county. The impact of this IV incident is bringing a conversation that I invite the supervisors and that I invite everyone in the county to join the tenants and hear what's been going on. That we've seen as tenants, as people helping tenants in the tenants union, trying to provide care however we can, and as we've seen at the Legal Aid Foundation. This is a crisis that's been continuing, and I strongly urge the supervisors to consider that this is urgent and should be intended to protect as many of our tenants as possible. And that at this point, all we're asking for is good faith. Thank you.
We will now return to Zoom for Christina Lang to be followed by David Moore, who is our final speaker. Christina? Looks like we just lost Christina. I don't know if she still wants to provide comments. If so, please log back on to provide your comments. Otherwise, we will go to David Moore as our final speaker. David?
Hello, everyone. Thank you to the county supervisors and to all of the empathetic individuals who have spoken today. And what strikes me is that you are my friends. I know you on the board and nearly every person who has spoken today. We are responsible for each other. Otherwise, what are we doing here? Every time I think about the mass evictions that are taking place, it brings me to a place of tears. Every conversation that I have with people, I'm fighting tears. I call in an official capacity. I can, and, you know, as a pastor, as the first vice president of the Santa Barbara affiliate of the NAACP, but I'm calling as a human in solidarity with all tenants, all my siblings. How can any of us sleep, including homeowners? How can we sleep tonight when our neighbors are losing sleep because of housing insecurity? So I say to you as friends, consider the psychological pressure of having your life disrupted this way. Moving when you choose to move can be stressful, but when you're forced to move, and these folks weren't leading cushy lives in the first place. So I support the emergency ordinance and Legal Aid Foundation amendments. Thank you for hearing me.
And we did receive Christina Lang back on Zoom, so we are going to Christina Lang, who is our final speaker on this item. Christina?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please proceed.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm sorry. I lost audio a few moments ago. I'm back. I'm Christina Lang. I'm a 40-year-old resident of the county. I have been an Isla Vista resident, a Goleta resident, and a Santa Barbara resident. I support the urgency ordinance with the amendments, and I am just blown away by the quality and love and passion of the people who have shown up to speak with you today, and for your devotion to doing something to help the people in the core group, but also all of us. I also really am appreciating the Santa Barbara Tenants Union. And I do want to speak to friends who are housed, who have never had the problem of a rent increase they couldn't support or loss of home. You know that some of us, including me, have had to share studios, sleep on sofas. You don't know what the crisis is for some of us, but all of the folks listening today need to thank the Board of Supervisors if they pass this urgency ordinance and continue to look at the problem of a moratorium on mass evictions. Thank you for your time and appreciate your work.
And that concludes public comment on this item.
Could we make sure we have the language put up on the screen of the legal aid amendments and our ordinance language if possible? Is there any questions from the board before we move to comments, questions? Supervisor Capps?
Yeah, Chair Williams, just a clarification, is this?
This is the clean copy that was just presented to us on our desks, I believe. Does this include the amendments or not include the amendments?
From legal aid.
Mr. Chair and members of the board, so what you're seeing on the screen is a strike through an underline, and so that's the new language that was requested by a number of the speakers and legal aid for you to consider.
So this is different than what I got yesterday and read this morning.
Supervisor Lavadino, yes, it is slightly different. It's the same in all respects except for the underlying language here in the legislative intent, and then there's underlying language in the remedies section.
Could you go over the substance of those, what those changes are in the remedies section?
In the remedies section? Sure, just a minute.
Yeah, help walk me through it, because I was just familiarized myself with the thing I got 4 hours ago.
And we have one announcement from the clerk.
Chair Williams, members of the board, thank you. I just wanted to announce for members of the public who are viewing online at home and here that we did make copies and they are available in the back of the room if you'd like that in hard copy form, and it is available online and has been distributed to all the board members both in North and South County. Thank you.
Madam Clerk, we don't have it here in North County.
Oh, thank you, Supervisor Hartman. We will ensure that you get that right away.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, so you received a hard copy packet, and for Supervisor Hartman and Nelson, I believe it's on the way, but it's also posted online for you to review as well as for the public. So there's just in the track changes version, you get a clean version and a track changes version. This is the one you just got. So the track changes version is the second ordinance in the packet. So you'd flip back to the second ordinance in this packet. It's the same ordinance, it's just that one is track changes and one is clean. And it's also displayed on the screen. So in the track changes version on page 2 of the ordinance, under legislative intent, the underlined language is added. It says the requirements herein shall apply to termination notices provided after the effective date of this urgency ordinance, which is similar to what we had before. This is really the new language. And in any unlawful detainer action initiated after the effective date of this urgency ordinance. The other additional changes are.
Could we stop there?
Sure.
Could you explain what that means? I think it goes to the point that we heard from a number of commenters that this would work at each stage of the eviction process. I think this is the language that is pertinent, but could you explain how this would work?
Supervisor Hartman and members of the board, if adopted as an urgency ordinance, then this ordinance applies prospectively. So the requirements would apply in the future, including to any unlawful detainer actions. So this language on legislative intent is just stating that and making it clear that any actions, whether it's a notice or an unlawful detainer action, anything that happens after this ordinance is effective, then we need to comply with that. The owner would need to comply with those new requirements.
So does this apply to the cases we heard about today in Isla Vista? Or are those retrospective?
Supervisor Hartman and members of the board, it's really going to be fact specific because there's been some notices that have been sent, some that may be sent in the future. Unlawful detainer action is something that occurs later in the process. And so for unlawful detainers at that next step, when those occur, when and if those occur, these requirements would apply.
Thank you. So it's a way to catch more within this ordinance.
And Supervisor Hartman, members of the board, yes, I believe so. It's extending this or clarifying that it applies to anything that happens after the point that this ordinance is effective.
Madam Council, I have a question. Could you explain
Go
to me
ahead, go ahead, Supervisor Nelson.
what an unlawful detainer is and why one would be filed?
Supervisor Nelson, members of the board, at a high level, essentially an unlawful detainer action is when someone has received notice of termination of their lease and they do not leave. And so an owner needs to take a court action in order to get them to leave.
Because they are staying there unlawfully?
Supervisor Nelson, I believe so.
Okay.
And then to just move forward on the other changes, section 4424, which is also on page 5 of the packet in track changes, and also displayed on the screen. It's similar to what the language is in the legislative intent. It's saying that it's going to apply prospectively to notices that are sent after the effective date, as well as unlawful detainer action initiated after the effective date. And then it makes it clear that failure to comply with provisions of this chapter is a defense in an unlawful detainer action for a tenant. A tenant may also seek injunctive relief. These remedies are not exclusive, so if a tenant has other remedies that are seeking, they're not limited to what is in the ordinance. And those are the only changes that are before you.
This is really difficult for me to get this language without having legal advice on the risks that it poses to the county. I am concerned about us drafting legislation that would encourage people to potentially do something unlawful and break a contract and what liability that might bring to us. And I only have limited time here, but I'm really concerned about that.
I do understand the concern, though all of these provisions, including the amendments by legal aid, have been vetted by our county council. And frankly, if we wanted to be adventuresome legally, we probably would have put some more things in here. This is, I guess, to my comment of the unfortunate confines of established legal rights of a county or city to put some, as what was mentioned by a member of the public, speed bumps, restrictions, a totality of steps that a landlord would have to go through to act in good faith.
Question.
Supervisor Labnia.
How does this differ from what the city of Santa Barbara has established?
Supervisor Lavanino, the provisions are largely the same. There were amendments made to, because we already have an existing Chapter 44 with relocation payments, there were some changes to make sure it wasn't inconsistent. I do not know if this new remedies language that was added this morning is included in the city's ordinance. We can check that and get back to you. It'll just take us a few minutes. And as to Supervisor Nelson's comments, so this ordinance Our office assisted with it, but it is being proposed by Supervisor Williams and Supervisor Capps. What you have before you, there's recent changes this morning, but there's also previous versions that were provided, and your board has discretion to adopt a previous version, adopt this new version, or also consider some variation of that. And we would be able to assist with changes if there was some piece of this that the board wanted to amend.
Okay, well, I think I'm probably going to be the swing on this here, so I need to really understand it before I pass it. So I really want to, I'm not an attorney, so let's go over the remedies section and spell it out in plain English for me. So if we could just walk through that real quick, and I know Supervisor Nelson,
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, you're kind of on your time, but
Supervisor Lavanino, I mean, this is important enough. We'll sit here as long as it takes to go through the remedies section.
okay,
It's
let's just walk through
fortunately
it real
short.
quick. Yeah, real short. I just need to understand it better.
And while they're conferring, I just want to make sure that the public understands that the reason why we could not take action on Tuesday is the state law requires us to publicly notice items. In custom, it's noticed longer than this, but we complied with the legally, essentially, most short time that notice can be made for these items for a Thursday hearing. And I just want to appreciate the work of both Supervisor Capps' staff and my own. Appreciate that some were already looking at these before the case of the sweeps, which helped this go a little bit faster, and appreciate all the work by County Council being willing to vet this draft and the amendments that are suggested.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, so Supervisor Lavanino, you want to walk through the remedy
Yeah, if you could,
section?
it's just saying, if I'm reading this right, it's just saying that if somebody's attempting, if a landlord is attempting to evict, that these are some of the defenses that a renter would be able to claim, that they didn't follow the proper noticing and those types of things?
Supervisor Lavanino, yes, that's the way that I'm reading the language. I will say that our office does not handle unlawful detainer actions.
Right.
And so this is setting up remedies for private parties. To your question about the city's ordinance, A, B, and F are, so the non-underlined language is what the city has, and they have one other which talks about failure to make relocation assistance payments in a timely manner shall be a defense to any unlawful detainer action. So one option would be, if we're not comfortable, if the board isn't comfortable adding this many, I mean, saying that the remedies are not exclusive to this section does give some leeway for an individual to seek whatever remedy is appropriate.
Can I, so essentially the ones that are not in the Santa Barbara City Ordinance is C and D in the remedies section? Because our draft is, the entirety of it is underlined, which is why Supervisor Lavanino is having a hard time.
My whole ordinance is underlined.
Having a hard time differentiating the new from the old.
Yeah, but those don't seem to be on their face anything. Failure of a landlord to comply shall provide the tenant a defense. I mean, that's the whole reason why we're doing the ordinance.
So supervisors, so this is probably going to be helpful to you. Okay, so you actually, I didn't realize this, but you have 3 copies of the ordinance. So the first copy.
I thought this ordinance was a lot longer than I anticipated.
So
there it is.
The
Okay.
first 5 page, or first 9 pages are a clean copy with the new changes. Then you see track changes. This is everything being added to it's all new Article 4. Then there's one more ordinance after that just shows the new changes that were added this morning. So you'll see it's not that much language. I can see why now it's confusing.
I wonder why you were looking at me so like I was totally confused, but now I get it. All right, understood. Thank you. And I don't think I have a problem with C, D, and E.
You good? Okay, let's move to comments. Who would like to go first? Supervisor Capps.
Yeah, Chair Williams, I just appreciate these additions, and I think the crux of it really does just provide a helpful and necessary clarification of the intent of the ordinance that you and I put forward, which is the immediacy and the rationale for the urgency and the emergency ordinance. So I am good with the changes, and I appreciate the work. Thank you.
And I, for my part, you know, we tried to work to provide concrete defenses and requirements for landlords to truly act in good faith. I really appreciate the aid from legal aid, not only on this ordinance, but on the tireless work. I know enough of you personally to know how large of caseloads you have, and the sort of the dedication that each one of your attorneys shows to tenants and those in your that are in need. My intent is to provide the strongest protections that we can turn around in this short amount of a time span, and the strongest ones we can provide that are in sort of the category of well-established precedent. I know that puts some confines on us. I think some confines that we should perhaps further examine. But I hope that today will provide either concrete defenses that will allow, that will send a strong signal, give some tools in your possession, but also send a strong signal to this corporate entity and to other landlords that might imitate them, that there are defenses at your disposal, and that the county wishes to defend tenants' ability to stay within their homes. I did strongly empathize with one of the statements that, you know, saying that that sometimes what we can act in is to be a speed bump in the path of corporate greed. And if I am reduced to being a speed bump in the path of corporate greed, then I am going to be the most inconvenient, spiky, rough, broken, Totopo-like, tire-damaging speed bump that I can be. And that is what I hope that we can provide here at the county.
Williams?
Supervisor Hartman.
Yes, I'd like to make a few comments. And first of all, thank you to you and Supervisor Capps for working so quickly with county council and getting this option for us. And thank you to everyone who testified. It has been absolutely heart-wrenching to put these human faces on this tragedy. In 2008, we had a financial crisis due to the slicing and dicing of mortgages. Now we've got something different, that pension funds and financial institutions are not just buying up the mortgages, they're buying up the housing stock. And they're doing this worldwide. And so we're seeing something radically different than we've ever seen in the past. In the state of California, we passed Proposition 13 as a way to stabilize costs for housing for homeowners. It was passed because so many retired people couldn't pay the property tax increases. But we're not really talking about how we stabilize and give secure housing to renters. And that's what this case is raising for all of us. I think of People Self-Help Housing in Guadalupe and what they're doing. They're doing renovations, but they're providing for the tenants during the renovation, and they have a right of return afterwards. I would like to see us get to that point eventually where renters have more security. What we see today are private gains in renovation, but there are tremendous socialized costs with homelessness, with people with these long commutes. These are left for the county to have to try to address. So we, I believe, have a real clear interest in trying to figure this issue out. As I said, it's an international problem, but we feel it, I think, more acutely here in Santa Barbara because it is such an attractive place to invest. And people realize private profits, but a lot of the quality of life has been things that the public, with the consent of the residents, have invested in. So those are my comments. I'm prepared to support what we can come up with today, but I think this is a problem that will continue to get worse. And we have to look at what are the limits of our ability and reach those, get to the edge of what we to protect people.
Thank you, Supervisor Hartman. Does Supervisor Nelson have a comment?
He had to leave.
Okay. He gave me warning, so Supervisor Lavanino.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I want to thank County Council. I think this is probably a record turnaround on writing an ordinance. For those that have tried to write an ordinance before, months and months and months. And so I appreciate this. And I just kind of want to put into context something too. We're talking about superseding a state law that is from the most progressive legislature in the country. So these are bold steps. And I want to thank everybody for coming today. Your personal stories were very moving, very touching. Personally, for somebody that grew up in a mobile home and had to live in a motel for a while, and I struggled as a renter for much of my life, I hear you and I sympathize with your predicament. So we got to figure out, like, how did we get here so we don't do it again? And we got here in this code red situation because this county's failed over the last decades to build the housing that we need. It doesn't take an economist to figure out that because we continue to limit the supply, the demand and the price continues to escalate. Now we have a vacancy rate that's around 1%. That's what happens. But what's happened is this board over decades has too many times listened to the voices of those that don't want to build anything because it's inconvenient for them, prioritizing that over renters and people that are on the margins. So we need to start making your voices heard. Tuesday we listened. And the message was that your situation demanded we hold this special meeting and create an emergency ordinance, and I fully support it. However, later in that same meeting, after you guys left, we also discussed the housing element, and that is the future of building houses and where we were going to put homes over the next 8 years in this county. And in that meeting, we were speaking to a different group of people, and the same, kind of got the same vibe, was that our staff has identified now over 7,000 sites for future housing. But we spoke from this dais and tried to calm people down by saying that we're not going to build those. Don't worry about it. We're only going to build what the state is forcing us to build, the minimum. And we can't have it both ways. So if this is an emergency, a code red, which I totally believe it is, then we need to ensure that we aren't doing what you said, sir, which was virtue signaling. We need to do everything we can to be bold and be proactive. And that means building the houses that we have failed to build in this county. We have to be consistent. And instead of telling people we're only going to build what the state is forcing us to build, we need to build on all the sites that we are identifying. So I'm curious, how many folks want to build the minimum as opposed to how many want to build the maximum? And that's kind of the question for everybody. When this room empties and another group comes in, we have to stay consistent. Today is just the start. But today happened because of decisions that were made by other board members long ago. And we have to realize that and fix that moving forward. So I'm happy to support this. I empathize with each and every one of you. The stories are soul-crushing, and I'll do my part to be part of the solution.
Supervisor Williams?
Supervisor Hartman?
I have something to add.
Yes.
Well, I really appreciate Supervisor Lavanino's comments, but I think this is not just a matter of supply and demand. This is, LA has the same problem, and they've built and built and built. There's something different happening in the economic world and the way people are investing in housing. In certain areas in Santa Barbara, up to 18 to 23% are vacant, second homes, investment properties. That has never happened before. Unless we think more about the kinds of ordinance regulations we have in place, we can build it and people will come in even to so-called low-income housing units, 700 square feet. And it's a lovely pied-à-terre. It's a great little foothold in Santa Barbara to come on the weekends. That's not what we want. We want the housing for the firefighters and the nurses and the teachers and the gardeners and people who spoke today who are on Section 8. And to get that, we need to think more than simply creating more housing. We need to make sure that the housing is going to the people who live here now, who want to work here, who contribute to the fabric of our community. So it's more than just the housing element, is what I'd like to say.
Well, I want to say something because I think it's pretty important what Mr. Lavanino just said. I mean, you know, and I guess one of the reasons why I sometimes am a bummer to listen to is because I fundamentally believe recognizing our own hypocrisy is the only way to achieve ethical and moral public policy, right? The reality is that for 43 years, there was not a single private apartment building built in the city of Santa Barbara. Most of my lifetime. Most of the housing stock that's rental in Isla Vista dates from the 60s, 50s, and if it's new, the 70s, right? We cannot deprive a rental market of new apartments for that long without it affecting price as well as other items. And I hope that the folks here will be engaged in the housing element update that will be unfolding over the next 9 months, because most of the housing that is proposed is rental housing, and a large section is proposed to be affordable. It will not save the people in the sweeps, but it might save a generation of working people in Santa Barbara. And Supervisor Hartman, I want to try to get you together with the gentleman I spoke to yesterday, this real estate investor, because his point was that the power that a predatory company has over us is precisely because they recognize our own weakness. They know that we are depriving the market of new housing stock, and so they know it's a sure investment to come in here, and then they gobble up second homes that are then not available for the people who live here. Then they put out short-term rentals. They do all these things because they know we are not going to respond by building more, and so that their investment is sure. And unfortunately, it's become a sort of weird mythology that NIMBYs have used, that somehow housing prices are going to go up if we built more of it, which, he was at pains to try to disabuse me of, that was truly a mythology. So I could blame this company, and I definitely do, but I also think it's important for us to blame ourselves and our own history. Ms. Alexander rightly pointed out that there is a history of housing policy in this county that has some real dark moments to it. And some of it was well-intentioned. Some of it was because we thought we were going to save the environment by not allowing anything to be built. Well, the data's in, and as 3 of the speakers pointed out, all that's created is more commuting, more traffic, more destruction of the environment. And so when the moment that we realize that the thing we thought was going to save us is destroying us, might be the moment where we need to change what we're doing. Because that housing policy not only is destroying the environment, but it is resegregating our community. Our lack of production of housing is what chased out the majority of our African American community out of the South County, and now it's destroying the Latino middle class. And it's providing a total lack of opportunities for young people in this community. So I hope this is not only an attempt to save these tenants and other tenants, but that we make it inform our other decisions to save a generation of Santa Barbarans from loss of housing. Can I get a motion?
Chair Williams, if I may, that requires a rejoinder.
Sure.
And I want this on record, that we can build it, and it's not necessarily going to go to the people we want to build it for. I also was living in Santa Monica as the person who testified during public comment. They built a lot of housing, but it's not for the people who work there. It's not for the working class, for the middle class, the missing middle, the low income. It just isn't. So we need more than to build housing. I don't disagree with that. And I'm certainly supportive of this ordinance. But what I'm saying is, don't expect these to fix it, because the problem is bigger.
I will concede that we can't just do production, but there's no substitute for production. You're right that there are other things that we must do. And I look forward to working with you on that, as we have done in the past. Supervisor Hartman. Supervisor Capps.
I would like to move us forward. I appreciate Supervisor Lavanino taking this big picture look. It's important, it's valuable. I also just want to echo his statement about the lightning speed. Again, I'm new here to this county and am incredibly heartened to the young mom who spoke to my heart about her struggles going to school, raising her child, 2 jobs. The request was, we need your help, and we are trying to help you. And I am incredibly touched by County Council, the hours around the clock working to put this forward so quickly. We're doing our best to try to help you. We're doing our best to try to help you. And with that, I'd like to move this ordinance forward with the amended changes.
I'll second it.
Mr.
Further discussion?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, just since there are alternative recommendations here, I just recommend the motion be clear that it's items A, B, and C, including the revisions made in the hearing today.
Specifically, that's the language that is up on the screen, amendments suggested by legal aid. Is that clarification agreeable to you, Supervisor Capps?
Absolutely.
And that is to me as the seconder. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Oh, we got to do a roll call because it's remote.
Supervisor Capps?
Aye.
Supervisor Nelson is absent. Supervisor Lavanino?
Aye.
Supervisor Hartman? Aye. And Chair Williams?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-1 with Nelson absent.
Yeah, Darcel, you know the rules of the county? Okay, we have a closed session. We're not done yet, so please tell us what the closed session is about. The members of the public do not need to stay for closed session, but you may want to hear what it's about.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, there's one item on for closed session, anticipated litigation. It's deciding whether to initiate civil litigation, one case. And the time estimate is 30 minutes.
Thank you. County Council, can you report out from closed session?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. The board met in closed session on one item of anticipated litigation, deciding whether to initiate civil litigation, and the board took no reportable action.
We will not be meeting next week because of the California State Association of Counties meeting, but we will be reconvening to April 18th for a special board meeting on budget hearings. Thank you.